The park was bustling with children, laughter filling the air as they ran in every direction. For Lily, a 28-year-old special education teacher, this was a rare moment of respite. Her weekends were usually spent grading papers or preparing lesson plans. Today, however, she decided to take a break from the chaos of her life and step outside for a walk in the fresh air. The sun was warm on her face, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a hint of peace. As she strolled, she noticed a young boy standing near a group of children playing soccer, watching them with an expression of longing. He was about 8 years old, with short, messy hair and a delicate frame. His eyes, however, betrayed a sense of sadness, as if he were a part of the world but not truly in it. He seemed to want to join the game, but something held him back. Lily, used to recognizing the signs of emotional distress, couldn't help but be drawn to him. Suddenly, without warning, the boy took a tentative step forward, his foot catching on a small patch of uneven ground. He stumbled and fell to the ground with a soft cry of pain, unable to catch himself in time. Lily's heart sank as she rushed over, her instincts kicking in. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, kneeling beside him. The boy winced, clearly in physical discomfort, but he tried to hide it by quickly looking away. His hands trembled as he pushed himself up, trying to stand on his own. "Don't worry, I've got you," Lily said, her voice soft and reassuring. She reached out to help him up, steadying him as he wobbled to his feet. For a moment, there was silence between them, and Lily could see the frustration in his eyes. His lips trembled, but he didn't speak. He seemed lost in his own world, unsure of what to say or how to express his feelings. Lily's heart softened. "It's okay," she said gently. "You don't have to pretend like you're fine. I can see it hurts." She offered him a small smile, the same smile she gave to her students when they struggled in class. The boy hesitated before looking up at her. His eyes, wide and uncertain, met hers for the first time. "I'm fine," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. But the way his shoulders slumped and his gaze dropped to the ground told Lily everything she needed to know. "I'm Lily," she said, trying to ease the tension in the air. "What's your name?" "Ethan," he replied quietly. "Nice to meet you, Ethan," she said with a warm smile, trying to make him feel at ease. "Do you want to sit for a while? It looks like it might be a little too much for you." Ethan nodded slightly, but instead of sitting down, he looked back toward the other kids playing soccer, his face clouded with frustration. "I can't play with them," he said, his voice thick with unspoken pain. Lily's heart ached for him. "Why not?" she asked, her tone gentle but inquisitive. I'm not like them," he said, the words dripping with a sadness far beyond his years. "They don't want me to play." Lily could sense that Ethan wasn't just talking about the game of soccer. He wasn't just excluded from play. He felt excluded from the world, from everything. She glanced over at the group of kids, who were too absorbed in their own game to notice the young boy standing off to the side. The realization hit her. Ethan didn't just need help with his fall. He needed someone to see him, truly see him. "That's not true," Lily said, her voice steady but full of conviction. "You're special, Ethan. You might not see it yet, but there's something about you that others can't understand. And it's not about being like everyone else." For the first time since she'd approached him, Ethan looked at her directly. His eyes were wide, a mixture of curiosity and disbelief, as if he couldn't quite comprehend her words. "You really think so?" Lily nodded. "I know so. You have a kindness in you that's rare. That's worth more than any soccer game." Ethan's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, a faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips. It was a small thing, but it meant more to Lily than anything. It was a glimpse of the boy he could be, the boy who had been buried beneath a mountain of isolation and pain. At that moment, Lily heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned slightly to see a man approaching. He was tall, dressed in a sharp suit, and had an air of authority about him. But there was something else about him, something hidden beneath the layers of his carefully constructed persona. He watched Lily and Ethan with a keen interest, his expression unreadable. Lily stood up quickly, taking a step back from Ethan. "I'll let you rest here for a bit," she said, giving the boy one last comforting look before she turned to the newcomer. "Is everything all right?" the man asked, his voice cool and detached. His eyes flicked over to Ethan, who was now sitting on the grass, staring at the ground. Lily hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. But then she realized that it wasn't her place to explain anything. "He's just fine," she said softly. "He was having a hard time, so I helped him out." The man's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he turned back to Ethan. He took a step closer, and Lily noticed a subtle tension in the air, as if the man were struggling with something internal. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, observing. Lily knew she should leave them alone, but something about the man intrigued her. There was an emptiness in his eyes, something that mirrored the loneliness she had seen in Ethan's face. She didn't know who he was, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter, this moment, was important. "Thank you," the man said finally, his voice low, but there was a hint of emotion there, something she hadn't expected. Before she could respond, he turned away and began walking toward Ethan, his gaze fixed on his son with a tenderness that seemed at odds with his stoic appearance. As the man knelt down beside Ethan, Lily watched from a distance, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her chest. There was something deeply familiar about the interaction, something that made her want to stay and watch, to understand more about this enigmatic figure and his son. She didn't know it yet, but this encounter, this simple act of kindness, would change the course of their lives forever. The following weeks unfolded in a rhythm that was both comforting and unpredictable. Lily found herself spending more time with Ethan, meeting him at the park after school, helping him with his schoolwork, and offering him a refuge from the isolation that seemed to hang over him. She saw the quiet yearning in his eyes, the way he longed to fit in with the other children but never seemed to belong. But with her, there was no judgment, no pity, only understanding and kindness. At first, Ethan had been hesitant, retreating into himself whenever she would try to engage in conversation. But Lily was patient. She didn't rush him, didn't push him to open up. Instead, she showed up consistently, her presence a quiet promise of support. Over time, Ethan began to trust her, and slowly, a bond began to form between them. One afternoon, as they sat on a bench in the park, Lily noticed how Ethan's eyes followed a group of children playing nearby, his gaze wistful, yet filled with a quiet sadness. He didn't speak for a long while, and Lily simply waited, allowing him the space to share when he was ready. Finally, after a long pause, he spoke in a soft voice. "I don't fit in with them," he said, his words carrying a heaviness that tugged at Lily's heart. "They don't even notice me when I try to join. It's like I'm invisible." Lily's heart went out to him. "It's not because you're invisible, Ethan," she replied gently, her voice soothing. "It's because they don't see you for who you really are. They're too busy with their own lives to recognize that you're different, but that doesn't mean you're not important. You have something special, even if they don't see it yet." Ethan looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and doubt. "Do you really think so?" Lily smiled warmly, her eyes filled with a compassion that Ethan had never experienced from the children around him. "I know so." As the weeks passed, their connection deepened. Lily began to notice the subtle changes in Ethan, his guarded demeanor softening, his smile becoming more frequent. He started to talk to her more openly about his struggles, and with each conversation, she could sense a new layer of trust forming between them. He spoke of feeling trapped in his luxurious world, surrounded by opulence that did nothing to fill the empty spaces in his heart. Ethan's life, though marked by wealth, felt hollow, as though he were living in a bubble, cut off from real human connection. "I don't want all the stuff, Lily," Ethan confessed one afternoon, his voice barely a whisper. "I just want someone who cares, someone who isn't just there because of what I have." Lily's heart ached for him. "You deserve more than just people who are around for what you have. You deserve people who care about you, Ethan. For you." The words hung between them, powerful in their simplicity. Ethan nodded, a small but genuine smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Unbeknownst to both of them, someone was watching from a distance. Alex had been keeping a quiet eye on the budding relationship between his son and the woman who had so effortlessly entered their lives. At first, it was purely from a place of curiosity, but as the days passed, he found himself unable to look away. He noticed how Ethan's mood had shifted since Lily had started spending time with him, how his son, who had once been a somber, isolated figure, was now showing signs of joy, even laughter, when he was with her. It was a side of Ethan that Alex had rarely seen, and it unsettled him in ways he didn't understand. He observed them from his office, peering out the window of his luxurious penthouse. There was something in the way Ethan looked at Lily, a tenderness, an openness, that Alex couldn't reconcile with the hardened walls he had built around himself. It was unsettling, yet, for the first time in years, Alex couldn't ignore the stirrings of something within him. Something he had buried deep down, something that had been dormant since his last heartbreak. Lily's kindness, her unassuming generosity, seemed to affect Ethan in ways that Alex couldn't replicate, despite all his wealth and power. He had hired the best tutors, bought every material possession money could afford, but nothing had brought his son the peace he seemed to find in Lily's presence. That simple act of compassion, the way she cared for Ethan without expecting anything in return, made Alex question everything he had come to believe about relationships. Was it really as simple as the trust Lily seemed to share so freely with his son? Or was there more to it than that, something he had been missing all along? One afternoon, when Lily was helping Ethan with his math homework, Alex found himself walking towards the park, compelled by an emotion he couldn't fully comprehend. He told himself he was simply making sure his son was okay, but as he approached them, he couldn't help but watch from a distance, unseen. Lily was sitting next to Ethan, her pen in hand as she guided him through a difficult equation. "You're doing great," she said encouragingly. Ethan's face lit up, and for the first time, his confidence seemed to match his intellectual ability. Alex's heart stirred with something unfamiliar, a combination of awe and something deeper. He watched them for a few more minutes, then, feeling the pull of the moment, he finally walked over. "Ethan," Alex called, his voice rougher than usual. Ethan looked up, startled, his face immediately lighting up when he saw his father. "Dad!" Lily turned, surprised to see Alex standing there, her heart skipping a beat as she met his eyes for the first time in weeks. There was something different about him today, something softer in his gaze, though he still wore his usual businesslike demeanor. "I didn't mean to interrupt," Alex said, his voice softer than Lily had expected. "I just wanted to make sure everything's all right." "It's fine, Mr. Knight," Lily said, offering a polite smile. "Ethan and I were just going over some homework." Alex nodded but didn't look away from Lily. There was something in her eyes, a quiet understanding, that made him feel both unsettled and strangely comforted. He had expected a colder reception, but there was none of that. She was simply present. He wasn't sure why, but it bothered him in ways he hadn't been bothered in a long time. Just as the conversation started to fade into awkward silence, Lily heard a name being mentioned from the nearby coffee shop. A familiar one. "Did you hear about Alex Knight and his son, Ethan?" a woman whispered as she passed by. Lily froze, her heart skipping a beat. "Alex Knight?" She blinked, unable to fully process the words she had just overheard. Her eyes darted back to Alex, now realizing the true identity of the man standing in front of her. The successful, distancio who had been silently observing her and Ethan for weeks. He was the same Alex Knight that the world knew about. The billionaire, the untouchable. Lily's mind raced. Her admiration for Ethan and the bond they had shared suddenly felt complicated. She had been helping this child, not knowing who his father was, but now, the weight of the revelation was clear. She was connected to one of the richest men in the world, a man she had assumed was out of reach. And yet, here they were, two worlds colliding in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The air in the park felt thick with unspoken words as Alex stood across from Lily, his gaze locked on her with an intensity she hadn't expected. She had known for weeks now that Ethan's father was a powerful man, but standing before Alex Knight, in the flesh, everything about him seemed even more imposing than she could have imagined. There was an air of control about him, his sharp suit fitting him perfectly, his expression unreadable. Yet, despite all that, Lily felt a pull inside her, one that had nothing to do with his wealth or status, and everything to do with the growing connection between them. Alex, however, didn't speak at first. He simply watched her, his eyes lingering on her face as though trying to decipher something hidden beneath her calm demeanor. He had always been a man who thrived on control, on carefully orchestrated interactions. But with Lily, he couldn't quite figure out why he was so drawn to her, why her presence felt like something he couldn't ignore. "Lily," Alex said finally, breaking the silence, his voice as smooth and distant as always. "I've been meaning to talk to you." Lily, sensing the tension in his words, met his gaze without flinching. She wasn't intimidated by him, not the way others might be. She had seen her fair share of wealthy and powerful figures in her line of work, and none of them had ever fazed her. They were all just people, hiding behind facades and money. She nodded, her expression calm. "About what?" Alex hesitated, his jaw tightening as if he were searching for the right words. "About Ethan." Lily's brow furrowed. "What about him?" "I've noticed," he paused, his voice trailing off, before his eyes flicked down to the ground for a moment. "I've noticed how much time you've been spending with him." Lily didn't say anything, but she was aware of the unspoken accusation hanging in the air. He wasn't directly questioning her intentions, but the implication was there. She had a choice. She could back down, make some excuse, but Lily wasn't the type to shrink away from uncomfortable situations. She wasn't afraid of what he might think of her, nor did she care about his wealth or status. "I'm just doing what any teacher would do for a student who's struggling," she said, her voice steady. "Ethan's a bright kid, but he needs someone who can see past his wealth, someone who understands that his life isn't all about luxury and privilege. He's isolated, Alex, and no one seems to care about that. So I'm here." Alex's gaze hardened slightly, but there was a flicker of something that looked like surprise, before it disappeared again behind his usual guarded expression. "I see," he said, his tone still distant, but there was a hint of curiosity there. "You don't mind getting involved with my son?" Lily didn't hesitate. "No, I don't mind. I care about him, and that's enough for me." She met his eyes head-on. "What's your concern, Mr. Knight? Are you worried that I'm taking advantage of your son's vulnerabilities?" There was a sharpness in her words, a quiet defiance that made Alex pause. It wasn't often that people spoke to him this way, not even in his business dealings. His initial instinct was to dismiss her, to remind her of the boundaries between people like them. But something about her tone, the directness in her voice, caught him off guard. She wasn't trying to manipulate him or get anything from him, and that was rare. "I didn't say that," he replied slowly, his voice shifting slightly as if the walls around him were beginning to crack. He trailed off, unsure of how to articulate the strange emotions swirling inside him. "I'm just trying to understand why my son seems to be opening up to you, when he doesn't to anyone else." Lily's expression softened, but she didn't look away. "Ethan needs someone who sees him for who he is, not just the boy with the last name Knight. He's a kid who's hurting, Alex. And I'm not asking for anything in return. I'm just trying to help." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was thick with the weight of things left unsaid. Alex felt a stirring in his chest, a mix of admiration and something else, something that unsettled him deeply. He hadn't realized until now how much he had been keeping himself at arm's length from his son. Watching Lily with Ethan had brought it all into sharp focus. Ethan was depending on her, and in a way, Alex could see why. But the thought of his son relying on someone else, someone who wasn't part of his carefully controlled world, discomforted him. He wanted to pull Ethan back into the world where he could protect him, keep him close, keep him from getting hurt. But deep down, Alex knew that the kind of protection he had been offering wasn't the kind Ethan needed. As the day wore on, the bond between Lily and Ethan continued to deepen. Ethan began turning to her more and more, not just for help with his homework, but for emotional support, too. He relied on her for comfort when he fell down, and Lily offered it freely, never questioning why he needed her. She just gave him what he needed, without hesitation. One afternoon, as they were sitting together in the park, Lily gently placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder as he spoke about another instance of feeling left out. His voice was quiet, and his hands were trembling slightly as he clutched the edge of his book. "I don't want to be alone anymore," he said, his voice barely audible. Lily felt a lump form in her throat, but she kept her voice steady as she spoke. "You're not alone, Ethan. You have me." and I'll always be here for you." At that moment, Alex appeared in the distance, his gaze immediately falling on the scene in front of him. Seeing his son's vulnerable expression as he leaned into Lily's comforting presence, a tight knot formed in Alex's chest. He wasn't sure what to feel, but he knew that something was shifting inside him. Ethan was no longer just his son. He was someone who had found solace in the one person Alex hadn't expected. And that realization made him question everything. As he stood there, watching them, the tension between him and Lily seemed to grow more palpable. Then, as if on cue, their eyes met across the park, and there was a brief, charged moment where neither of them moved. Alex could feel something, a spark of attraction, something undeniable that lingered between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of the connection they shared. Lily quickly looked away, her heart racing, but it was too late. She knew that the chemistry was there. She felt it too, though she refused to acknowledge it. They were worlds apart, and the lines between them were so clearly drawn. But as the day ended, both of them knew one thing for certain. Whatever had begun between them, however complicated or impossible it seemed, wasn't something either of them could simply ignore. Lily stood in the park, watching the sunlight fade behind the trees, her mind heavy with the thoughts she had been struggling to push away. Everything had been moving so quickly, so intensely. The connection she had built with Ethan had become something undeniable. She had never expected it to go this far, to feel so personal, so essential. But now, in the quiet of the evening, as she stood on the edge of a world that was not her own, the weight of it all was too much to bear. The moment she had walked into Ethan's life, she had known she was different. She had felt the divide between her world and his, but it hadn't mattered, not at first. She had come to him simply as a teacher, someone who could offer him help, guidance, and support. It had started with that, but as she had spent more time with him and more time in Alex's world, something had shifted. She couldn't ignore the growing discomfort inside her. The gulf between her humble life and their towering, perfect existence was no longer just a vague feeling. It was real, sharp, and present in every carefully orchestrated moment she spent around them. Alex's world, with its wealth, its expectations, its perfection, had started to suffocate her. She had always been the outsider, the girl who worked tirelessly to make a difference, to help, to give. But here, in the heart of this opulence, she was just a guest. She wasn't meant to stay. The shift had started slowly, Alex's growing distance, the subtle hints from his business partners and friends, the unspoken pressure that she could feel even though no one ever voiced it directly. She had noticed the way Alex's attitude had shifted, how the tension had built between them. His work was pulling him in one direction, his son in another, and then there was her, caught between both worlds, trying to navigate a path that didn't seem to have a place for someone like her. It was that feeling, that sense of being too different, too outside the life they led, that had finally pushed her to the edge. She couldn't be the one to disrupt their world. She wasn't meant to stay. She was too small, too inconsequential. The closer she had gotten to Ethan, the more she realized that she was only borrowing time in their lives. Eventually, she would have to leave, and so, one evening as she stood in front of Ethan's door, the words tumbled out of her mouth. She told him she couldn't continue seeing him, that it was time for her to step back. She wasn't sure if she was trying to convince herself or him, but the words felt true. She wasn't meant to be a part of their world. She didn't belong in that pristine house, in that life filled with social events and expectations. Ethan's face crumpled as the words sank in, his eyes filled with confusion and panic, and before she could even react, he was reaching out for her. He grabbed her hand, his small fingers trembling. "Please, don't go," he begged, his voice shaking with emotion. "I need you. I don't want to be alone anymore." Lily's heart twisted in her chest as she looked down at him, the sight of his vulnerable eyes breaking her resolve. She had seen this side of him before, the lonely child who longed for a connection that no one else seemed to understand. And now, he was asking her not to leave, asking her to stay in his life. The truth hit her hard. She hadn't realized just how much he had come to depend on her. Her presence in his life had become more than just a routine. It had become a lifeline. She hadn't meant to become so deeply woven into his world, but in that moment, standing in front of him, it became clear that she had. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I think I'm not the person you need. You need someone who can be here for you all the time. I can't be that for you." The sobs that followed were more than she could bear. Ethan clung to her desperately, his small body shaking with grief. His tears soaked into her shirt as he begged her to stay. Lily felt as if her heart was being ripped out of her chest. She hadn't realized just how much he had come to rely on her until this very moment. He needed her in a way she hadn't anticipated, and the truth of it made everything inside her ache. "I can't do this to him," she thought. "I can't leave him like this." But even as she thought that, a part of her knew that the only thing she could do was let him go. She wasn't the one who could be there for him long-term. She didn't belong in their world. She was an outsider in a life that wasn't hers. When she finally pulled away from him, her heart felt heavy with the finality of the decision. She had to leave, but as she turned to walk away, Ethan collapsed to the floor, his sobs echoing in the silent room. It was then that Alex appeared, drawn by the sound of his son's cries. He rushed in, confusion and concern flashing across his face as he saw Lily standing near the door, her expression torn. His eyes moved to Ethan, who was curled on the floor, his small body racked with sobs. "Ethan!" Alex exclaimed, kneeling down beside him. He looked up at Lily, his eyes wide with a mix of confusion and concern. "What's going on?" "I'm sorry," Lily whispered, barely able to speak through the lump in her throat. I was trying to explain to him that I can't be a part of his life anymore. It's too complicated." Alex's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Lily saw something shift in him. There was no anger or judgment in his gaze, just vulnerability. He looked between her and his son, and then something seemed to click. "You don't think you belong here, do you?" Alex's voice was quiet, almost as if he was speaking to himself. Lily didn't answer. She couldn't. But Alex's expression softened, and for the first time, she saw the struggle in his eyes, the internal battle he had been fighting. He understood now. He understood how much Lily had come to mean to both him and Ethan, even if he had been too blind to see it until now. "I don't want you to leave," Alex said, his voice steady but filled with something deeper, something raw. "You've become important to Ethan. And to me." Lily looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what to say, no idea what to do. Everything was so complicated, and yet, in this moment, she realized something. She couldn't walk away, not when Ethan needed her, and not when Alex had finally opened his eyes to the connection they shared. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was clear that leaving was no longer an option. The only choice was to face whatever came next, together. Lily sat on the small bench by the park, her hands folded tightly in her lap, trying to focus on the bright autumn leaves swirling around her. Her thoughts, however, were tangled. She had tried to keep herself distanced from Alex, convincing herself that their worlds were too different. She had told herself that their connection, as genuine as it felt, was fleeting. But the way he had stood by her the other day, his vulnerability undeniable, had made something shift deep inside her. The emotional weight of it all was almost suffocating. Alex had tried to reach her in the most unexpected ways. He had supported her when she'd faced challenges at work, stepping in and helping her resolve a dispute with a difficult parent. He had done it without hesitation, quietly, no strings attached. But there was more to it now. She could feel it in the way he looked at her, in the way his actions began to speak louder than words ever could. But despite his obvious affection, despite his actions showing a side of him that was real and raw, Lily couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy. She had come from nothing compared to the life Alex led. His world was polished, refined, and filled with people who would never understand her, people who saw her as nothing more than a teacher, a helping hand, but never as someone worthy of being on equal ground with them. And Alex? Well, he was everything she was not. Powerful, successful, respected. How could someone like her ever truly fit into his life? She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to clear the thoughts clouding her mind. But then, a familiar voice broke through her silence. "Lily, Ethan's voice was soft, yet filled with an earnestness that stopped her thoughts cold. She opened her eyes to see him standing nearby, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling slightly, caught off guard by his sudden appearance. "What are you doing here?" "I was looking for you," he said with a slight frown, his eyes wide with concern. "You seemed upset the other day and I didn't want you to leave." Lily smiled, though it was a weak one. "I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. I'm just thinking." He hesitated for a moment, then slowly walked over to sit beside her. He wasn't the same shy child she had met months ago. There was a newfound confidence in his movements, a maturity beyond his years. He had come to depend on her so much, and now he was offering something in return. "You don't have to be afraid of leaving," Ethan said quietly, his voice steady and sure. "Because if you love someone, you don't let them go, no matter how different they are. That's what Dad taught me." Lily turned to look at him, her heart aching at the wisdom in his words. She had never expected a child to be the one to offer guidance, yet here he was, telling her something she had needed to hear. She wasn't sure if Alex had even realized the depth of the lesson he had taught his son, but Ethan understood it all too well. "I just don't know if I belong in his world, Ethan," Lily whispered, the weight of her own self-doubt settling over her like a heavy blanket. Ethan's eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, the two of them shared an unspoken understanding. He leaned over, his small hand resting gently on hers. "You belong with us," he said simply. "You belong with Dad and me. We need you." Her heart swelled with emotion, but just as quickly she pulled away, her fears creeping back in. "I don't want to ruin anything," she said, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to be the one who complicates your lives." Ethan didn't say anything more. Instead, he simply stood up, took a step back, and looked at her with a gaze that was somehow both innocent and wise beyond his years. "It's not about what you want, Lily. It's about what we all need." The next day, everything changed. Alex, who had been largely silent since their last conversation, approached her again, but this time, it wasn't the same cold, calculated businessman she had known. There was a warmth in his eyes, something raw and open that made Lily's heart race. "I want to show you something," he said, his voice more serious than usual, but his intentions clear. Without waiting for her response, he gently took her hand and guided her down the hallway of his penthouse. She followed him, heart pounding, unsure of what was happening. He led her to a large, beautiful window overlooking the city. "Do you see all of this?" he said, his voice soft, almost reverent. This isn't what matters to me anymore. It's what's inside that counts." Lily turned to him, meeting his gaze. "Alex, what are you trying to say?" He took a deep breath, as if gathering all of his courage. "I'm trying to say that I don't care about any of this. The money, the business, the expectations. What I care about is you, Lily. And I know I've been afraid to admit that because it's easier to control everything around me. But the truth is, I'm not happy unless I'm with you. And I need you to know that." Lily stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing to catch up with his words. "But I don't belong in your world, Alex. I'm not like you. I don't have what it takes to fit in." He stepped closer, cutting her off. "I don't care about all that. You make me feel like I'm not alone anymore. And you've made Ethan's world brighter. That's what matters. And that's what I want." Lily's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard Alex speak like this, so open and vulnerable. He wasn't the powerful so now. He was just a man, standing before her, laying his heart bare. She could feel the depth of his feelings, and for the first time, she realized that the fears that had held her back were nothing compared to what she had found with him. "I'm not perfect, Lily," he continued, his voice low and sincere. "But I'm here and I want to be with you. I want us to build something real. Something that's ours. No matter the distance between our worlds, I'm ready for this." Tears welled in Lily's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. For so long, she had doubted that she deserved something like this. She had questioned her place in his life, in his world. But now, standing here, hearing him speak from his heart, she knew the truth. "I love you," she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with every emotion she had kept hidden for so long. Alex pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. He didn't need words to answer. His actions spoke for him. At that moment, they both knew. And as they held each other, Ethan's words echoed in their minds. It's not about what you want. It's about what we all need. They had found each other, and in that shared connection, they finally understood what it meant to be a family. The day of the company gala arrived with all the pomp and grandeur expected from one of Alex Knight's high-profile events. Held in the extravagant ballroom of a luxury hotel, it was a night meant to celebrate success, power, and influence. The guests were a who's who of investors, high-level executives, and social elites. People who lived their lives surrounded by wealth, prestige, and perfection. Lily had never been to an event like this, and though she had made her peace with her relationship with Alex, she couldn't help but feel a little out of place. As she looked around the glittering room, her insecurities crept back. She was just a teacher, a simple woman who had found herself in the orbit of one of the richest men in the world. It was hard for her not to feel like she didn't belong here, among these perfectly polished people. But as the night progressed, she couldn't help but notice how different Alex was. He had been more at ease with her since their confession. His usual cool demeanor softened, his presence warm and genuine. His eyes often lingered on her with something deep, something real, and for the first time, she began to feel like she might just be enough in his world, that maybe their worlds weren't as far apart as she had thought. Then, just as she was admiring the elegant but understated decorations, the ballroom went silent. A hush fell over the crowd, and Alex stepped up to the microphone, his commanding presence filling the space. His usual confidence was there, but there was something different in the way he held himself tonight, something that made Lily's heart race. He had a plan, something he had clearly been waiting for the right moment to execute. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alex began, his voice strong but filled with sincerity, "I want to take a moment to introduce someone very special to me. A person who has been an essential part of my life in ways no one could have predicted." Lily's heart skipped a beat, her breath catching in her throat. The room remained still, everyone watching him with rapt attention, and she could see all eyes slowly turning toward her. "I want to introduce you to Lily Bennett," Alex continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "She's been more than just an educator for my son. She's become someone I've come to admire deeply. She's kind, strong, and courageous, and she's someone who, despite her quiet nature, has touched the lives of those around her in profound ways. I owe her more than I could ever express." Lily stood frozen, feeling the weight of the room's attention on her. She hadn't expected this, didn't think it was even possible that Alex, the man who had spent so much time hiding behind his business persona, would ever make such a bold move in front of so many people. His words were a gift, a gesture that spoke volumes more than anything he could have done or said in private. But Alex wasn't done. His voice softened, becoming more personal as he continued. "I've learned something from Lily that I never thought I would," he said, glancing down at her. "I've spent my life focusing on control, on power, and on appearances. But with Lily, I've learned that it's the simple things, the connections we make with others, the love we share, that truly matter. I'm grateful for her, and I'm proud to stand here and tell all of you that she's not just my son's teacher. She's my partner, and she's the woman I love." The crowd, though initially stunned, broke into applause. Lily's chest tightened with emotion, and her eyes filled with tears. She had spent so much time doubting whether she deserved Alex's love, questioning whether their different worlds could ever truly meet. But here, in front of everyone, Alex was telling her that she had not only earned a place in his world, but that she was also an integral part of it. For the first time, she truly believed it. As the applause died down, Alex turned to her with a look that was filled with nothing but love and affection. He stepped off the stage and walked over to her, taking her hand in his, guiding her toward the center of the room. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied softly, his eyes locked on hers. "I just wanted the world to know that I love you. And I'm not ashamed of it. I'm proud of it." At that moment, Lily realized that all the doubts she had carried with her, about not belonging, about not being worthy, had been swept away. Alex had shown her, in front of the entire world, that she mattered. And that was all she had ever needed. Later that night, after the gala had ended and the crowds had dispersed, Lily found herself standing in the quiet solitude of Alex's penthouse. Ethan was already tucked into bed, his face peaceful in sleep. The weight of the evening, of everything that had happened, had left her feeling both exhausted and euphoric. As she stood by the window, looking out at the glittering lights of the city, Alex approached her from behind. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, his chin resting on her shoulder. "You know," he murmured, his breath warm against her skin, "that wasn't just for show. I meant every word." Lily closed her eyes, letting herself lean into him. The connection between them was undeniable, a bond that had been forged over time, built on love and understanding. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And I love you too." Alex turned her to face him, his hands gently cupping her face as he leaned in to kiss her softly. It was a kiss full of promise, full of everything they had been through and everything they still had ahead of them. It was the kiss of a love that had endured doubts, fears, and uncertainty, but had ultimately triumphed. In the months that followed, Lily and Alex settled into their new life together. It wasn't always easy, blending their worlds, navigating the complexities of their relationship, and balancing their individual needs. But with each passing day, they grew stronger. Ethan thrived in a home filled with love and understanding, surrounded by the two people who had come to mean the world to him. Together, they were a family. The story closed on a simple, quiet evening. The three of them sat together on the couch, laughing as they watched a movie. Ethan, sandwiched between Alex and Lily, leaned his head against them, a contented smile on his face. As the camera pulled back, the image of them, together, a family, was one of peace, love, and acceptance. At that moment, everything had come full circle. The journey from doubt to certainty, from loneliness to connection, had been long, but they had found their way. And as the scene faded to black, the final message was clear: love, in all its forms, always finds a way to win.